Today we'll recap a 2007 American supernatural horror film named Dead Silence, directed by James Wan and written by Leigh Whannell. A young widower returns to his hometown to search for answers to his wife's murder, which may be linked to the ghost of a deceased ventriloquist. Kindly remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you like the video. At the beginning of the movie, we see a man named Jamie and his wife Lisa. He was attempting to repair the kitchen sink line, but it was not working. Then Lisa goes to him and says that they can bring food from outside. Then we notice some activity outside their door, followed by the ringing of the doorbell. When Jamie gets outside, he discovers a large package outside his front door. They have no idea who sent this package or what's inside. When they open it, they discover a ventriloquist dummy inside, which Lisa is overjoyed to see and immediately begins to play with. Then we see that Jamie has gone out to fetch some food, while Lisa is still playing with the dummy at home. Then she covers it with a white sheet, and we learn that she is expecting a child. Then she finds that her home sound system has automatically shut off, which surprises her. Her wall clock becomes silent, and the sound from the kettle on the stove goes mute. Then she hears a child's giggling from across the room. Now she's terrified of it and walks over to that dummy. But just as she's about to remove its sheet, the dummy tosses the sheet at her, and she flies out the door. Then we see that she starts vomiting blood, after which the dummy drags her inside the room. Jamie returns home with food after a while and calls Lisa, who replies that she is in the room. Now, as he approaches the room, he notices that there is blood on the floor, which surprises him. Now Lisa tells him from the room that she has a surprise for him. When he enters the room, he notices Lisa giggling under the sheet. When he lifts the sheet, he discovers Lisa's lifeless body on the bed, her tongue severed, which makes him quite nervous. We then see Jamie at the police station, where he is being interrogated by Detective Lipton. Lipton informs him that he is under suspicion of murder, because no one else was at home at the time but the two of them, which prompts Jamie to tell him about the package that had arrived at their house that night. He claims there was a talking dummy in there, making Lipton wonder what that dummy may have to do with Lisa's death. Jamie then says that the dummy that speaks in his village is considered wretched, and that his presence causes the people around him to die. Lipton now lets him go for the time being due to a lack of proof. Jamie returns home and discovers a mysterious message on the box concerning Mary Shaw, a deceased ventriloquist from his hometown of Ravens Fair. Then he returns to his hometown with the dummy and discovers that the city has been entirely destroyed. He arrives at his father Edward's house, where a lady greets him and is overjoyed to see him. He doesn't know her, so she introduces herself as Ella, his stepmother. After that, she welcomes him inside, where Jamie notices Edward in a wheelchair. Jamie finds that he had a stroke 2 months earlier, and Edward expresses his condolences for his wife's death. We discover here that Jamie and his father had a strained relationship. Jamie then inquires about Mary Shaw, to which he responds that it is only folklore. He then heads to the Walker funeral home, where he encounters an elderly woman who is interacting with a raven. After that, he meets Henry Walker and helps him plan Lisa's burial. Now, Jamie is sleeping in his room when he abruptly wakes up and sees Billy standing right in front of him. Then he sees Mary Shaw's ghost there, which frightens him. But there is no one there when he switches on the light. Henry, on the other hand, transports Lisa's body to his lab, which he is shocked to see. The next day, there is Lisa's funeral, which Jamie is quite upset about, and as he is leaving the funeral, he sees Marion. She quickly approaches him and inquires whether he saw her when she killed Lisa. She warns him to stay away from Mary Shaw. That's when Henry arrives and begins to take her away. But before she leaves, she asks Jamie to bury the dummy. Jamie discovers a grave after they depart, and it is Mary Shaw's grave. Now he rushes to his room and discovers that the dummy's name is Billy. Then he brings Billy to the cemetery and visits Mary Shaw's grave. Looking around, he notices Billy's grave and begins digging it, at which point we see Billy's mouth open. Jamie notices that his grave is empty, so he digs it up and dumps it. Meanwhile, Billy turns his head as Jamie shuts the grave. Then he gets into his car and prepares to depart, but he notices someone moving behind him, which frightens him. Abruptly he notices Billy standing next to him, who then vanishes. After that he returns to his room, where he is startled to discover Billy and Detective Lipton. Lipton inquires as to why he buried Billy. He claims that it came from this graveyard and that he had come to keep it back. Lipton leaves after a brief conversation, taking Billy with him, and Jamie notices that Lipton has taken up residence in the room next to his. Jamie kidnaps Billy from Lipton's room the next day and drives her to the Walker funeral home. He asks Marion about it, seeing that Marion starts getting scared and leaves from there. Then Henry explains to Jamie that Mary Shaw was a famous and popular ventriloquist, who was publicly humiliated when a young boy named Michael rudely claimed that he could see her lips moving during one of her performances. Some weeks later, Michael disappeared and his family blamed it on Mary Shaw and lynched her. Mary's last wish was to have her body turned into a dummy and buried with her 101 dummy, who she called her children. Henry, then still a child, saw Shaw rise, but was spared, thanks to his silence, because Mary takes her revenge by killing those who scream. He then shows him images of some of the families who had their tongues cut off by Mary Shaw. Jamie next visits Mary Shaw's theater, where he discovers a book with diagrams for creating the perfect dummy, as well as some new paper cuttings relating to Michael's disappearance. Here he notes that Michael's surname was also Ashen. Then he notices Mary's ghost in the mirror, which terrifies him and causes him to flee. Henry, on the other hand, hears Marion chatting to someone and walks over to see what she's up to, only to discover that she's talking to Billy. When Henry notices this, he becomes enraged and takes him to his lab. He then proceeds to grab the equipment to bury him, but suddenly he hears his wife Marion's cries. He rushes to find her in the basement where she frequently hides, but quickly realizes that the voice he heard was not Marion's. He is terrified by this, and when he sees Mary Shaw's ghost there, he screams, and Mary Shaw cuts his tongue, after which we see her eating his tongue, and then his corpse falls out. Following that, we find Jamie at his father's house, where he asks him why he had lied to him. He inquires about Michael Ashen and Mary Shaw's ties with their families. Now Edward tells him that Michael was his great-uncle. As part of Mary's lynching, the Ashen family forced her to scream and permanently silenced her by cutting her tongue out. As such, she has since been seeking revenge against their entire bloodline, and all those in Ravensfair, by killing them using the same method. And it was for this reason that he had sent Jamie away from here, hoping to keep him safe from the curse. Lipton then approaches him and informs him that all of Mary Shaw's dummies have been dug up, and that he is suspicious of Jamie and is ready to arrest him. But Ellie informs him that there is a call for him. Henry is on the other end of the line, pleading with him to go to Shaw's old theater and establish his innocence. Jamie now enters the theater and begins searching for Henry. Then he hears his voice calling him upstairs. Now Jamie follows his voice into a dark hallway, but Lipton says from behind that no one is here. But then they hear Henry's voice, which surprises him. Now they're both on the lookout for him, and Jamie warns Lipton not to scream no matter what. They then discover all of the dummies that had been removed from the grave, as well as the body of the missing kid Michael. Meanwhile, they notice a chair in motion, which is occupied by a dummy. Seeing this, Jamie takes the name Mary Shaw, to which the dummy responds. Jamie now inquires as to what she wants and why she murdered Lisa, to which she asks him to come near. Lipton stops him from going near her, but Jamie ignores him and approaches her. She informs him that he was not the last Ashen, but rather that the last Ashen was inside her. She then licks him, fearing that he falls behind, and the dummy suddenly bursts out laughing, and he sees Mary Shaw's hands. She raises the dummy, revealing that she was standing behind it, and that the tongue belonged to her. Jamie is told not to scream by Lipton, who then shoots her, and Mary Shaw vanishes. All of the dummies then come to life, and Lipton begins shooting them. Jamie now says that she lives in these dummies and that they must eliminate them all. He then tosses the lamp at the dummies, setting them ablaze, and notices Mary Shaw standing behind Michael. They begin sprinting from there, and Mary Shaw can be seen chasing them. Now, Lipton falls from the bridge while crossing it, causing him to scream, and Mary Shaw murders him in midair. Jamie is now attempting to flee when he is startled by Mary Shaw and falls into the lake below. Then he emerges from the water, and after a few while in the car, he recalls that the dummies he had burned in the theater lacked Billy. He then runs immediately to Henry's house, where he hears Marion's cry and is startled to discover Henry's dead body. Jamie inquires about the dummy, to which Marion responds that his father had come here and taken it with him. Now Jamie goes to his dad's house where he finds Billy in one of the rooms. But as soon as he picks it up, Mary Shaw attacks him, frightening Jamie, and he throws Billy into the fire. As soon as it burns, Mary Shaw leaves from there. But then Jamie sees his dad there, and when he goes to him, he learns that he was dead and is a dummy converted from his corpse. Now Jamie is shocked to see this, and he begins to realize that Ella was in charge of his father, which is why she was constantly close behind him. And when Henry's call arrived, Ella spoke in his place. Ella was the picture-perfect dummy described in Mary Shaw's book. Ella then asks from behind him, "Who's the dummy now?" He screams, and Mary Shaw strikes him, killing him as well. After this, we see a photo of Jamie in which he has become a puppet, and he narrates that beware of the stare of Mary Shaw. He had no children, only a dummy. And if you see her in your dreams, be sure you never scream, and the film closes here. Thanks for watching.